Hi, I'm Nguyen from nChain. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm here to talk to you about Bitcoin SV, a new full node implementation for the Bitcoin Cash protocol that we believe is the BCH protocol to fulfill Satoshi's vision. And that's why we named it Bitcoin SV. I want to spend my time talking to you today about why Bitcoin needs a protocol that is three things: stable, scalable, and secure, and how Bitcoin SV will help deliver this for the Bitcoin Cash community and network. Bitcoin SV, named to bring forward Satoshi's vision. Let's begin with the premise that I think we can all agree upon, which is that Bitcoin Cash was birthed to the world in August of 2017 because we needed to restore the original vision of Bitcoin. So key proponents of the Bitcoin community created Bitcoin Cash, brought it to the world, and we and many other groups around the world now support it. And that's because the original Bitcoin vision was not achieved with Bitcoin Core. It didn't achieve the scaling, the fast transaction speeds, and the low transaction costs that were necessary to bring about a true peer-to-peer cash system envisioned by the Satoshi white paper. So Bitcoin Cash's mission in its first instance was to fulfill the Satoshi vision. We believe now that it's time for a new full node implementation that will better reflect going forward how to bring that vision to life in terms of the implementation of the protocol. Bitcoin SV is already out in alpha and beta test code on our GitHub repository. nChain was asked to create a new full node implementation by CoinGeek's mining operation, supported by other miners as well. And that's because they wanted to have more of a direct voice in the direction of the protocol for Bitcoin Cash and move away from being an environment where the different protocol developer groups had so much influence and sway over what happened with a protocol and network that is really supported by the money as well as the skin in the game of miners such as CoinGeek. And that is a key part of our vision for Bitcoin SV, restoring and giving to miners the choice and voice in what happens with this network. We're also launching for Craig Wright, this is a personal initiative of his, a new mining pool, SV Pool, which will again fulfill the Satoshi vision. It will run Bitcoin SV. It's launching soon in October here of 2018, and miners can join this pool if they really want to advance the Satoshi vision. Our message is simple. It's time for Bitcoin to grow up, to professionalize, so that the big businesses of the world will want to use its cryptocurrency and its blockchain for major enterprise applications. And we need a software implementation and a protocol for Bitcoin Cash that will enable that. So what does the Bitcoin protocol really need? As I mentioned earlier, it needs something that is stable, scalable, and secure. Let's talk about each of those in order. Stability is so key for the big businesses of the world to use Bitcoin Cash so that it will grow. In early Satoshi writings, this is one of the early Satoshi posts from June 17th of 2010, it was stated that the nature of Bitcoin is such that once version 0.1 was released, the core design was set in stone for the rest of its lifetime. So the Satoshi vision was to set a core design for the protocol and have it in stone and let that be the base upon which applications and projects and the network could run. Now, when it says set in stone, do we treat that literally and say there can be never, ever any change? No, I think we can all agree that's not a reasonable approach. But I think the point of this early Satoshi post is clear. We need a stable protocol, just like the internet protocol does not evolve often over time. It's not changing all the time. We're on IP version 4 now, but for the most part, internet protocol has been very stable, and that has allowed the major businesses of the world, as well as smaller ones, to reliably build websites, mobile apps, and all kinds of other projects and applications on the internet. Big businesses of the world, before they'll create something and invest in a new project, they want something reliable because it costs them millions of dollars, lots of time and a lot of resources to initiate a new project or application. Therefore, they need to know that the protocol they're building on is not going to change every 6 months, is not going to do something which makes their project more difficult in the middle of their own development roadmap. And that's why we need to move away from a system where every 3, 6, or whatever number of months we're talking and debating about what new feature or what new opcode or what new change should be introduced into software implementations. We need to get to a protocol that is stable so that major enterprises are comfortable relying upon it. And that's what Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned. And that is why Bitcoin SV is designed to restore the original Bitcoin protocol to the version 0.1 and let it remain that way. Because it never was allowed to fully flourish in its original design. The Bitcoin Core Development Group obviously took control of Bitcoin Core, changed things such as imposing the artificial block size limit at 1 megabyte, imposing other artificial limits, disabling old Satoshi opcodes, ultimately adding segregated witness. And so we never got to see what the original Bitcoin Core design was capable of doing. Instead of trying to fix it and change it all the time, we need to get to a stable protocol. And that's important for big businesses because they want to create projects on a foundation that is solid rock, not sand. It shouldn't be moving all the time because otherwise the expense and time necessary to take a project or an application from idea to completion and release into the marketplace gets far more complicated. And that's a key message for you to understand. That's what the Bitcoin SV vision is. Create a protocol that will enable the global businesses of the world to be reliably building on solid rock, not on moving sand. Because if we do that, that will grow the usage of Bitcoin Cash and grow its value. What are the benefits of a stable BCH protocol? Well, no more experimenting and unnecessary changes to the Bitcoin protocol just because certain developers want to try something out or think it's better. And it could be that certain features have a value, but it should only be very tested as well as consensus-driven changes that are introduced to the Bitcoin protocol only when absolutely necessary. There won't be more disputes between Bitcoin Cash developer groups about what changes should be happening every 6 months. If we can get this restored to the original protocol and allow it to scale big, then it's easier. Nobody wants disagreements every 6 months. Developer groups don't, the miners don't, the businesses that operate on Bitcoin Cash do not. And so it is far simpler and more conducive of a big enterprise approach to get to a stable protocol. There's thus more certainty for all of the users. And that also leads to more money for miners and the business users of Bitcoin Cash if there is a reliable, rock-solid foundation to build on top of. Second, let's talk about the importance of scalability. The Bitcoin Cash network needs to scale big and needs to scale big quickly. Satoshi also envisioned this as well. Going back to early Satoshi writings, here is a quote from Mike Hearn that is quoting an email that he received from Satoshi Nakamoto many years ago, in which it was stated by Satoshi, the existing Visa credit card network processes about 15 million internet purchases per day worldwide. Bitcoin can already scale much larger than that with existing hardware for a fraction of the cost. It never really hits a scaling ceiling. So even at the beginning of Bitcoin, the Satoshi vision was scale big, scale bigger than the Visa credit card system, scale worldwide, and don't have a scaling ceiling. There shouldn't be some cap. There shouldn't be some artificial limit placed on scaling. In another Satoshi writing, it was written that the current system where every user is a network node is not the intended configuration for large scale. That would be like every Usenet user runs their own NNTP server. The design supports letting users just be users. The more burden it is to run a node, the fewer nodes there will be. Those few nodes will be big server farms, and the rest will be client nodes that only do transactions and don't generate. So early on, it was already predicted that mining would get to the point where you would have big server farms, that we didn't have to protect the network's ability to have individual, smaller home node users. So it was envisioned a long time ago this network would scale big, and that would mean miners would be running large server farms. That was the Satoshi Vision. And so we need big blocks, and we need them now. And there is an economic reason for that, especially for miners, to protect miner revenue. And miner revenue is important because miners have to be profitable in order to be incentivized to provide the computing power that runs the network and provides its security. If they're not profitable, they leave, and there's less computing power and less security. Every few years, the block reward gets cut in half. And this is why it's so critical to begin the scaling process big now. In less than 2 years, in 2020, the block reward will be cut in half from its current 12.5 coins to 6.25 Bitcoin Cash coins. So in order to remain profitable, miners need to make up that lost value of 6.25 coins through their other second revenue source, which is the transaction fees they get from the transactions added into the block that they mine. And right now, transaction fees are very low because it's very cheap, and it should be, to send transactions on the Bitcoin Cash chain. But in the future, as the block reward keeps getting cut in half, miners will have to depend more on those transaction fees to make money that makes it profitable. The revenue streams will diversify. They'll get transaction fees from payments, as well as smart contracts, token transactions, and other usages. And so we want to keep on the network the individual payment transaction fees very low, under a penny, right? Because we want people to be using this as an electronic cash system, as Satoshi envisioned. So that means as that block reward keeps getting cut in half, to keep miners on the network, they have to make more money through higher transaction volume to make more total transaction fee amounts. And that requires getting high transaction volumes, and that requires getting big blocks and scaling, and to do it now. So we actually modeled at nChain what this would take in 2 years to compensate for the 6.25 Bitcoin Cash coins miners would lose in block reward in 2020. So we played with some variables, and you don't have to agree with all of the numbers I'm about to talk to you about, and you might, massage them in your own way, but I think the message you get at the end is going to be the same. So we modeled what the Bitcoin Cash transaction fees would need to be to make up for 6.25 coins worth of value in 2 years. At 3 different Bitcoin Cash price points, assuming Bitcoin Cash was worth $1,000, $5,000, or $10,000, which are all potentially realistic price points in 2 years. We did that for 3 transaction types of varying data byte size, because that's what affects the cost for a transaction. Payment transactions, which are small at 225 bytes. Smart contracts, we're just assuming are going to be bigger size data, maybe 1,000 bytes. And tokens, which could be 1,500 bytes. And we did it at 3 possible transaction fee levels, because miners can charge different levels of transactions. And that's what will create a competitive marketplace where miners will compete to say, hey, let me offer something better for the network. At low, medium, and high transaction fee levels, which are from 0.00009 US dollars per byte, so fractions of a cent, to 0.0022, and high at 0.00033. Then we evaluated the transaction fees depending on the size of transaction. So you can see here, these are all displayed in US dollars. We looked at different scenarios, assuming a low fee, medium fee, and high fee by miners. What the price would be then for you would pay if you sent a payment transaction. It might be 2 cents, because that's the amount you would multiply the low fee price per byte times the number of bytes that it would cost to send a payment transaction. That would get 2 cents for low fee for payment transaction, 9 cents for a smart contract transaction and 13 cents for a token transaction at the lowest fee, and modeled up to the highest fees, which you can see here are 8 cents for a payment transaction, 33 cents for a smart contract transaction, and 50 cents for a token transaction. Now, this model assumes actually higher fees than would be ideal, because we ideally actually want to keep the payment transaction fees even lower than that. But even at these higher individual transaction fees, it would still require very large blocks. Based upon that, we looked at the number of transactions which would have to be included in each block, and that will vary depending on the makeup of the types of transactions, right? Because the blocks in the future won't just have payment transactions. They might have some smart contract transactions. They might have a token transaction. So in example 1 here, if the block capacity is filled only with payment transactions, the smallest ones, you need a lot of individual transactions, 1.6 million, to generate the transaction fee amount needed, in this example, assuming a BCH price of $5,000 US. You need a lot of transactions. In example 2, we assume you'd have a more varied makeup of transaction types, a mix of 40% in the block payment transactions, 30% smart contract, and 30% token transactions. Using these variables, you can see here that you would need about 800,000 total transactions to generate the transaction fee needed, assuming a BCH price of $5,000 US, and that's at the lowest fee range. So you still need a lot of transactions. Therefore, you need big enough blocks to fit that number of transactions and the data size that is necessary to support those different types of transactions. So here's the summary. Miners need big block capacity under any of these scenarios. Here's this complex chart which shows the scenarios for low transaction fees, medium, and high transaction fees at each of the 3 different modeled price points for BCH in 2 years. And then we calculated, therefore, what's the minimum block size you would need to fit the necessary number of transactions at each of those scenarios. As you can see here, it ranges from the lowest of 17.9 megabytes in size to 670.6 megabyte in size. But that's the minimum. You never want a block to be completely full, because if the block had at its highest 670.6 megabytes and was 100% full, that's a dangerous situation in the network. So then we took a modeling of, well, on average, how big do we want the blocks to be filled? And ideally, they shouldn't be filled that much. So we modeled it at, well, assume the blocks on average are only 2% full, so that they could take 50 times more at a peak period, right? Let's say on holiday shopping season. And then also an average of 10% full, which we think is too full on average, but just for modeling purposes. And you'll see it leads to a variety of possible maximum block sizes needed. So this would be the maximum block size needed to get to the data capacity to support the transaction volume needed to make up the 6.25 BCH in value at various different price points. And you can see here that it ranges from anything from as low as 178 megabytes, which is still very large compared to what we have now, a 32 megabyte capacity, to highs of over 32 gigabytes. But the median range seems to be numbers in the 6, 4, 8, 12 gigabyte and approximately up there range. That's still very large. And that's what we would need the max block size to be just in 2 years. And right now we're only at 32 megabytes in size. So our point is, if we need to get to those large block sizes in just 2 years, we need to begin the scaling process now. Because you can't just jump from 32 megabytes in 2018 at the end of the year to 12 gigabytes, which are many multiples of that in 2 years. It's not practical, it's not realistic. And therefore, we need to begin the scaling process massively now in order for miners to maintain and grow their profitability. We cannot wait. And people will say, well, there's not the payment transaction volume on the network to justify going to what we encourage, 128 megabyte blocks or something miner configurable. But we are trying to build a highway for businesses to come and send not just their small cars, but their trucks and their freight carriers. That's what the transactions are in terms of data size. We have to build it so they will reliably come on a network protocol that is stable, as I said first, and also scalable. Because otherwise, if you were trying to create a project that requires massive data and block size on a blockchain, and you look at the Bitcoin Cash network, you might say, well, it's just not having the block size that's big enough to support it. And businesses, therefore, will shy away from the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. And I know that because businesses approach nChain and me all the time to have us try to advise them or help them with their blockchain projects. And they sometimes ask why they should do it on Bitcoin Cash, which is what we advocate. And they'll ask, does it have the scaling, the throughput, and the data capacity to support my token project, my game project, my supply chain management project, my property title registry, which wants to record not just the ownership of title, but as a company approaches about 3D renderings and images of the actual property, which require huge amounts of data. And they won't start and won't invest the money or raise venture capital funds unless they believe that the project can reliably be done on that blockchain. So we have to give them the scalability so they'll have the comfort to be confident to build their project on Bitcoin Cash. Otherwise, they'll go somewhere else. They'll go onto another blockchain. They'll choose another platform. And that's why we're advocating with Bitcoin SV, raising the default block size, the maximum, to 128 megabytes in size. That's a big leap, but it's not going to be enough. As we saw from the earlier figures, in 2 years we need to get to at least 6, 8, 12 gigabytes. The other alternative we're comfortable with is leaving it to be miner configurable. Let the miners decide what they're comfortable with, given their own risk tolerance and competitive fee approaches to accept as blocks and as to mine as blocks in terms of size. In fact, the current software implementations, including Bitcoin ABC, already allow the block sizes to be miner configurable. It's just that in Bitcoin ABC, the mechanism to do that is buried in debug settings and has never been actually promoted to miners. So if you type in /bitcoind -help, and you get the configuration operations, you won't see it right away. But if you type in what you see on the screen here, Bitcoin D -help -debug, you'll see a much longer list. And within that list of configuration options, you'll see a place to modify excessive block size where you can tell and provide instructions to not accept blocks larger than this particular limit. The default here is set at 32 megabytes in size. That could be changed, but it's not obvious to miners to change it. We and the Bitcoin SV project want to make that maximum block size setting much more prominent for miners so they can easily change it, and we'll show the settings in the default RPC get info results. So here's just a mock-up you can see of where it would be apparent much more easily for miners so that they can change the default block size for themselves. Finally, we want a protocol that is secure. And nChain is working very hard to ensure security for the software and the scaling approach, because we know that's important, and we know that's a concern of people on the network, that we want everything to be secure. We're starting to run already multiple gigablock testnets, not just one. We're providing code improvements, including parallelization. We're working on hardware acceleration, all designed to make sure security is there. In addition, we're doing capacity planning to ensure a safe upgrade. We're going to be doing stress testing of all limits. We're going to provide data about our testing to miners so they can interpret it and start making their own choices, because again, we want to empower miners and give them informed choices on the risk and reward about what size blocks that they are comfortable with for themselves. And again, that's about miners' choice. And so choice requires intelligence and empirical data, and we're working to generate that, and we'll provide that. So let me conclude by summing up what we believe are the true advantages of Bitcoin SV as a full node implementation, and why we believe miners should choose to run it. Well, scaling. We are going to empower that quickly and safely. We believe in locking and stabilizing the protocol and allowing businesses to build on it so there aren't unnecessary feature changes in the code in the future. which are cumbersome and time-consuming for businesses to deal with. If they have to deal with that every 6 months, that's a bad thing and will disincentivize usage of the network. Bitcoin SV avoids that. We will professionalize Bitcoin and have Bitcoin grow up with quality assurance, security audits, including an outside security audit firm we have engaged at considerable cost to audit the code and ensure that it's secure. And we're going to also work on zero confirmation security. The path to rapid Bitcoin adoption and revenue is through Bitcoin SV. Let's scale this big. Miners will make more money. The businesses that operate on Bitcoin will make more money. We will empower premium services so that miners can charge higher fees for certain premium types of transactions, such as the ones that require big data, a smart contract or a token transaction that's more complicated. And the key issue for all the miners who are considering what to do with software implementation choices is a different philosophy and approach. We believe that developer groups, including our own, shouldn't be thinking of changes every 6 months to introduce. We want to get the Bitcoin protocol back to its original, allow it to scale big, but other than that, not make changes unless something's absolutely necessary and absolutely and clearly and consistently requested by the miners, because they should have that direction and voice so that we don't be having this conversation every 6 months. Let's just get the protocol there and everyone can build on top of it and make money, including the miners. So as I said at the beginning, the protocol for Bitcoin Cash needs to be solid rock, not moving sand for global businesses to build on top of. That is the philosophy of Bitcoin SV. It's what we think is going to bring the original Satoshi Vision to life as it was intended to, and allow the Bitcoin protocol to do what it never got the opportunity to do before it was changed. Let's give it that opportunity, because if you all really believe in the Satoshi Vision, which I believe you do because you support Bitcoin Cash, then you should support this, because it is the clearest, most direct effort to bring the Satoshi Vision to life. So support us by joining the SV pool if you're interested in supporting this and Dr. Craig Wright's vision, and therefore help us bring to life the Satoshi Vision once and for all. And before I leave you tonight, I do want to have one final thought. I know there's concerns about the possibility of a chain split of Bitcoin Cash. I want to make very clear, nChain, and I know CoinGeek as well from talking with them, agree with this. We do not want and are not seeking to cause a split of the BCH chain. We do not think there needs to be one and there won't be one. Instead, the choice is clear for miners. Bitcoin SV to fulfill the original Satoshi Vision. We're going to work very hard to establish the path that we're taking is the one that should be the clear choice for miners. And therefore, we ask you to support Bitcoin SV and support this original Satoshi Vision.